Welcome to the Plant Cunning Podcast,
where we explore a relationship to plants, other people, and the mysteries of nature.
Coming to you from the high Allegheny Plateau in central New York.
We are your hosts, A.C. Staubel
and Isaac Hill. Welcome to the Plant Cunning Podcast. Today we have Lian Bruno of Puff Herbals, which is a herbal smoking blend company that she started a few years ago, and it's been doing really well. And we have an amazing conversation about using herbs as a smoke. And smoking is one way to actually activate the constituents in herbs and medicinal herbs. And I think it's a pretty wonderful conversation. I think you're going to enjoy it. Before we get into the conversation, I do want to just put a couple plugs out there. We do have a Patreon. It's just basically like a tip, like we don't really offer anything special there anymore because it's just too much for us right now. But joining at even like the $4 a month level, it really helps keep this podcast going. Also, if you'd like to support the show, we love it when you write reviews on Apple Podcasts or comment on the YouTube video, like it, subscribe, share with your friends. These are all wonderful things you can do to support the podcast. Also, I am offering Vedic astrology readings, and you can schedule a reading by emailing me at info@plantcunning.com. You can also go to my website, askisaac.me. And AC has a wonderful website where you can order herbs at travelingherbfarmer.com. So check out travelingherbfarmer.com and email me if you'd like to set up a Vedic astrology reading. Okay, and here's the episode. I hope you enjoy. Okay, welcome to another edition of the Plant Cunning Podcast, and today we have Lian Bruno from Puff Herbals. And Lian is an herbalist and is made this amazing company, Puff Herbals, centered around using herbs as a smoke.
Herbal smoking blends.
Herbal smoking blends, and it's been one of my favorite. Over the years, even before I was doing much herbal things, when I was just smoking tobacco and cannabis, there was a lot of like bringing in the mullein to clear the lungs and the different herbal blends was it's always been part of my experience with herbs too. So
I think a lot of people, yeah.
Yeah. So Lian, how are you today?
I'm doing so good. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And where are you calling in from?
I'm in Chicago, south side of Chicago.
Sweet. Awesome. Nice. Not too far from us in central New York.
Not too far. Close enough.
No? Yeah, some people are
just like a 12-hour drive or something.
Yeah. It's closer than the UK where you were previously.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So we do have a traditional first question for the podcast. So how did you come to the plant path? Like what got you into all the herbal world?
Sure. I would say it started when I was just maybe even 5 years old. My parents, we always had a big vegetable garden in our backyard. And as soon as I was really able to have like some semblance of fine motor skills, my chore was weeding. So I would just kind of be out in the garden. I just remember being always outside in the summertime in the sun, just weeding and really just looking so closely at dirt and the little bugs I would find and the leaves and like, oh, this leaf has like little hairs on it and this one has like these little dots on the underside. And I was always just so like into the detail of everything. And my father has a master's degree in plant physiology. So he would kind of teach me some things as I found them or answer whatever questions I had. And we would always go for a lot of walks, like after dinner around the neighborhood. And this was in Medford, so a northern suburb, well, technically a city of Boston. So pretty urban, but there would always be these plants, growing out of the cracks in the sidewalk, or there would be trees with like fruits. And my dad would always point them out to me. So like wormwood, I remember, was always one that I really liked, like the silvery underside of the leaves and how soft they were. Every June, like mid-June, the mulberries would be fruiting. And so you would always see the black stains on the sidewalk where they were growing. And we would always just bring buckets and pick them. And people would give us weird looks and say, don't eat those are poisonous. And we're like, no, they're not.
Yeah, you
Um,
love that.
yeah. And so we were like those weird people, just like eating plants on the side of the road all the time. And yeah, I guess in college, I went to Ithaca College in New York. I just started smoking a lot of weed, to be perfectly honest. I never smoked weed until I think like 2 nights before I left to go to undergrad. And I said to my friends, I was like, guys, I've never drank or smoked weed. Can we do that? So I'm just like not this total square when I go to undergrad. And so we
Perfect.
did. And, it was just like, what is this? Yeah, so just started smoking a lot. And like, Ithaca is a very hippie place. So, just started wearing tie-dye all the time and stuff like that. And then when I turned 20, my 20th birthday in the summer, July 19th, I did mushrooms for the first time. And then that kind of became this like annual ritual is that I would eat mushrooms on my birthday. And I believe it was my 23rd birthday. I was at the beach and I had this, not like a vision per se, but just I could really feel the presence of my late Chinese grandfather who died before I was born. So I never met him. And I was just like kind of getting this message like, embrace your Chinese ancestry more. Because growing up, like, it's not obvious to people that I am part Chinese. And so, especially growing up as a kid, like, my own friends didn't know. Because, like, why would I bring that up, as like when I'm 7, But then, they would start like making fun of Chinese people or Asian people.
Yeah.
And then I was like a kid, wanting to fit in. And I just was like shrink down and like not say anything. And that day on the beach, it was like my grandfather was telling me, like, just be who you are and embrace it. And so then that week, I started researching herbalism schools and enrolled in a Chinese martial arts studio.
Nice.
Yeah, so I started a clinical herbalism apprenticeship at Commonwealth Holistic Herbalism in it was in Boston. I think they're just online now. And yeah, studying Kung Fu like multiple times a week. Yeah. And yeah, did the 3-year clinical herbalism apprenticeship. And this was all in person, which I am so grateful for now because, we'd be talking about plants and handing around tinctures and being like, okay, this is astringent, or like, oh, this is drying, or that you can feel like the energetics. And yeah, I love that. Did the free clinic whenever the Kat and Rin at Commonwealth Herbs would throw that on the weekends. And I remember it was during the second year, which was like the more advanced year. And then the third year was the clinical rotation. And then kind of like, how do you want to be an herbalist in the world? We'll help you with your goals, whether that's business goals or you want to be like a practicing clinical herbalist. It was during the second year, we were going over case studies, and Rin brought up a client who, among other things, was trying to quit smoking cigarettes. And so he custom formulated a smoking blend just for this client to address, like, why was she reaching for a cigarette? When was she reaching for a cigarette? What was it like relieving her of in her life at that moment? And he was like, how can I formulate just as we would a tincture or a tea blend, a smoking blend just for her. And that just blew my mind. And because it had never really come up until that point that a lot of the herbs that we had been learning about were also smokable or just smokable herbs in general. And I was just like, wait a minute, and went home and just started tossing in herbs with my cannabis. And I was like, oh, like when I add passion flower, I don't get so like spinny. Or when I add catnip, I don't get that like tightness in my chest. And like I feel like I can't really take the deep breaths that you would when you're feeling calm. And yeah, just love that. And a friend of mine in school with me, one day Kaya was like, "Hey, we are sponsoring Herb Stock this year, which is in Somerville, Mass, is this big herbalism conference and marketplace." And she was like, we were in the third year at the time. She was like, "We have this extra long table at the event, but we don't need that much space. So do any of you guys in the advanced program want to sell stuff?" And so a friend of mine, we were like, who we'd like always been kind of bringing up, oh, smoking herbs and like which herbs do you like to smoke and when? We were like, let's do herbal cigarettes. And so we just showed up. I think we made most of them the night before, stayed up till 3, no marketing or anything. And there was just this huge line at the door the entire time. And like we sold out both days.
What?
And we had no packaging. We were just selling like loose cigarettes basically. And people would be like, "Do you have a bag?" And we'd be like, "No, sorry."
Yeah,
You know? And I was like, okay, there's something here.
yeah.
And what I especially really liked about it was people would come up, like we had 3 blends, essentially the 3 blends that I still sell now, like a signature, a minty one, and then a lavender one.
Hmm.
And people would be like, "Which one do you recommend? Like, what should I choose?" And I'd say, "Well, what do you smoke? Like, when do you smoke? Why do you smoke it?" And it was like this little mini consult.
Hmm.
And especially me, like having this like museum background, like behind the scenes, introvert, um, I really liked how it was just like kind of short and sweet. And, and then people would come back and be like, "Oh, I really like that one." And we could talk about it more, but it wasn't this kind of like sit down how I was with clients at the time,
Yeah.
like starting to become a clinical herbalist, which is what I thought I wanted. Seeing my teachers doing it in the world, I was like, "Oh, I'll just do that." Um, like a good session is like 2+ hours.
Yeah.
And, I could be on for that amount of time, but then at the end, I would just be so wiped.
Mm.
Yeah.
And yeah, I really liked the behind the scenes and just kind of the little, the short kind of guidance that I could provide to people and see like an immediate result because so many people would be like, "Hey, I just went out and smoked this and I loved it. Like, can I get more?" Um, yeah, so that's basically the whole path leading
Cool.
up to where I
Yeah.
am now.
That's awesome.
Yes, it's so interesting too, like the why people smoke and like what and getting into that actually, like what time of the day, like what are you wanting? What is it? What need is it filling?
Hmm.
And I remember for me, like I don't smoke tobacco anymore, but part of it was like the ritual of rolling the cigarettes.
Yeah.
I was always smoke hand rolled, and also like after a meal, you know.
Yeah. Hmm.
What kind of responses did you get? Like, do you have a feel for like and for why people smell? Like, what need is it filling? What people are doing it, and then what kind of herbs work best for those needs to fill those needs?
Yeah, most people were saying that they like to smoke in the evening,
Mm,
like after dinner, just like
mm,
sitting out on their porch with one. Some other people would say, "Oh, I like it as just like a break throughout the day."
yeah. Yeah.
Um, and fewer people, at least at this herb conference, would say that they would smoke in the morning.
Mm,
But kind of drawing from that market experience, I made this quiz on the site that asks people questions about like what time of day and why and like what is it doing for you? What do you want from your smoke? And I have been seeing like, quite a bit of people that fill out that quiz say that they like to smoke like right first thing in the morning.
yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like I remember also for me when I got off tobacco, one of the main herbs that helped me was lobelia,
Hmm.
right? So do you, and I think that, especially for people doing it in the morning, it's like there's kind of a definitely a uh physiological need,
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
which lobelia can help with. Um, but so do you have like blends to help people get off or
Off
get off
tobacco.
tobacco, or is it more?
Yeah. So what's interesting is that I can't legally call what I sell a tobacco cessation aid.
Right.
Yeah,
Because that is like an FDA, the FDA has to approve of those products, like a nicotine mint or gum or something.
Yeah.
Um, so what I can legally say is that while not a tobacco cessation aid, a lot of people work with them with the cigarettes or the smoking blends to, as you said, like maintain the ritual,
yeah.
um, have that same oral fixation.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Remember that is very important to me is to have that filter, because talking to a lot of cigarette smokers, they always say, "Oh, I just love smoking a filter," and
Yes.
it seemed like it wasn't even necessarily the nicotine; it was just that feeling
A
or like
feeling.
that
Yeah.
that pull. Um,
Yeah.
and I think for a lot of people, I think like if you were to take a step back as a smoker and be like, you know, nicotine, like kind of satisfying the craving aside, like what about the whole ritual is beneficial for you? And for a
Mhm.
lot of people, it's just taking a step outside for 10 minutes
I know that's
and
huge.
like just looking at clouds or
Yeah.
trees or feeling the wind on their face or just like not having their phone out. And for a lot of people, meditation doesn't necessarily come easily or naturally for them. And so
Right.
kind of having this motion that you can do with your hands, whether it's the rolling or just taking the pack out and flicking the ash off the end and just looking at it burn,
Sure.
that is kind of like a meditation tool for a lot of people.
Absolutely.
And I think like as a clinical herbalist, like the more that we can, like what can we add rather than like what can we take away?
Hmm.
And taking away the act of smoking entirely if someone is trying to quit can be very jarring for people. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's like, okay, how can we maintain this ritual, at least in the beginning, and provide you that same action and like nervous system reset.
Mm-hmm.
We can put herbs in there that like actually calm you down rather than just
Yeah,
satisfy the craving and like you think you're getting calm in that moment,
for sure.
like with tobacco or nicotine.
Mhm.
And yeah, I get a lot of people that have placed an order saying, I just got one literally yesterday saying these helped me quit smoking.
That's so
And
cool.
I have something, to still be social or still
Mhm.
just like have that break in the day.
Mm.
Um, yeah.
Yeah, totally. I think having that replacement and thinking about like what you can add is such a great approach as an herbalist in general, whether it's dietary, getting off of nicotine or cannabis um or drinking. Like I know for
Mhm.
a lot of sober friends having like a glycerite blend that they can pop into some seltzer water at the bar is like, here's my fancy mocktail, you know?
Right. And especially in a social setting,
Yeah.
I think it's so important for us as humans to still feel like we're partaking in, it doesn't, whether or not it's a substance or not, but just feel like you're partaking in the activity.
Mhm.
And, you know, smoking, drinking, maybe other substances, like they are a catalyst for connection and for, just kind of getting into this liminal state
Yeah.
that I think a lot of modern humans don't really get into as much. And, whether or not what you are consuming or swallowing or inhaling um, is psychoactive, like it's
Mhm.
still the act of like I am part of the group
Yeah.
and I am like entering this little kind of experience with others or with myself.
Yeah.
Kind of also like that idea of the cigarette as like a small sacred fire
Yeah, that's
too.
so cool.
Like
Yes.
that has been like that's such an important part of being human. Since the
Mhm.
beginning of humans was making fire and sitting around the fire and looking into the fire, gazing into the fire. You have your
Yes.
own little
Yeah. I
fire
think
to.
there's something very sacred about like the passing around
Hmm.
in a circle. Um, there was a book I read about like the history of tobacco in colonial America and just, what a huge influence it had socially, economically. And the author described the pipe as a portable altar. And I love that so much. And I think it's so true. And as similar to an altar that you may make in your home and, have like sit down and have a little moment with, like pray, you can put in different herbs. It doesn't need to be what is now like the conventional kind of go-to of nicotine
Sure. Yeah. Hmm.
or even cannabis.
Yeah. Yeah, one thing I was thinking about too, as you were speaking about like the reasons people smoke and like taking that break to be out in nature is something I wanted to go back to too, because
Mm.
it's like we're in such a go, go, go lifestyle. Like it's actually pretty common for folks to like have time allowed in work to go have a smoke break or to go like working at restaurants, like it's like part of the culture to like step outside and like have a smoke
Yeah.
break. And it's like you need that like breath of fresh air to get out of like that stressful environment for a little bit. And then when people stop smoking, they miss that smoke break. They like
Hmm.
just going outside and standing there like feels less than or something because they're missing
Yeah.
that like ritual. But it would be cool if we like prioritize like 10-minute mental health break where everyone can just go outside and breathe fresh
Hmm.
air and things like that.
Exactly. And as
Yeah.
someone who's worked in a kitchen, um, as like non-smokers didn't get that extra 10-minute
They
break.
didn't. They never took it.
No.
No. Mm-mm.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons I started smoking cigarettes.
Right.
Is
Yeah.
waiting
Hmm.
tables. Like I didn't get a break unless I had a cigarette.
Right. Yeah. And like a lot of people start for that reason. And
Yeah.
I remember specifically being like, hey, can I just like go stand outside for 10 minutes? And they said no.
No, like hard no.
Yeah. And in the beginning, I like made it a point to put on the website, like if you work at a place, if you work in food service,
Hmm.
and if smokers get a break, like you can just smoke one of these herbals and no
Yeah.
one's gonna know the difference.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. You need your smoke break too.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think that's such a cool approach to harm reduction too. So
Yes.
for folks that don't want to do the psychoactive cannabis while they're working or the the addictive nicotine and
Hmm.
they can have these herbal blends that will actually help them probably focus and calm down. I mean, certain herbs can energize too. Do you have any herbs that you like to work with if you're trying to like get work done in the garden and you need focus? Like, sometimes like smoking a joint will like help you do a creative project or a physical project.
Hmm.
So what kind of herbs do you work with in that sense of like you don't want to be tired?
Yeah, I would say any mint is
Mm.
great for this. Peppermint, spearmint, I prefer the flavor of spearmint to peppermint, but
Hmm.
I've found like the flavor just doesn't really come through in smoke like
Spearmint.
like I want it to, and I tried so hard to get it to, but
Okay.
it just doesn't. So peppermint's a great one, like if you currently or used to smoke menthol cigarettes, you can just put peppermint in there. A lot of places, a lot of states are making menthols illegal.
Yeah.
Um, but you could just throw some peppermint in to what you're smoking and it's a natural menthol.
It tastes just
Um,
like it, right?
yeah, I also, yeah, any mint like sage especially is this like just crisp, motivating energy. And I especially like sage because it also helps with feeling of overwhelm. which is a big reason why people reach for a smoke. It's like, oh,
Mm,
I'm so busy. I need to take a break. And so it can help you like find clarity, but then also help you to calm down in the sense of like, I just like can't get to everything. It's like, no, wait, actually, I got this.
nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, for me too. I feel like smoking a cigarette sometimes, like one of the functions it served was to like take a break and get some
Reset.
clarity. Yeah, reset, and
Yeah.
like
Mhm.
especially if you're working on like a writing project or if you're working on some creative project. To the
Hmm.
tobacco, I don't know if tobacco as one of its herbal functions, as its actions, it like helps you ground or like have some clarity. I
It
don't
is
know
very
what.
grounding.
Yeah, but that was definitely part of it. Was like that taking a step back.
Yeah, I think the grounding element, I think like, there is an aspect to that, and I'm not even necessarily 100% anti-tobacco or anti-nicotine.
Right.
Um, I'm just kind of addressing the patterns that I see in the modern world and
Yeah.
like
Mhm.
this kind of over-reliance of it. And the
Sure.
addictive nature obviously it doesn't help.
Yeah. Hmm.
But I think, the grounding aspect of smoking a cigarette is like, you are inhaling slowly and like you have to feel the smoke entering down your throat and into your lungs. And like, okay, are you going to hold it for a bit? And most people do. And like, so you physically need to just like stop and like focus on what you're doing. And
Mm.
because if you don't, maybe you inhale too much smoke and then you cough everywhere, and that's not cool,
Yeah,
especially if
yeah.
you're around other people. You have to be like, okay, I need to focus on what I'm doing. And I think like, especially when it comes to energy and focus, I think a lot of people they'll be like, oh, I need caffeine
Mm.
or I need nicotine to keep going. And yeah, and I've been drinking caffeine all morning as well. But I think there's definitely a time and a place. And like especially if you are writing or need clarity, in addition to kind of the grounding aspect, you could also be putting other plants in there that are more functional in a sense to like the outcome that you want. Um, and I think it's just this idea that, hey, there are other plants out there, you know?
Yeah,
Right.
and I think it's kind of weird that in this society we only think of you can only smoke tobacco and
Yeah.
cannabis, whereas like traditionally, like there are all sorts of plants that were used in smoking blends, and like in America, in like there the Nicky Nick, bearberry
Yeah.
and
Uva
sumac.
Ursi.
There's
Mhm.
so many plants that were part of that too. And so it's really cool that you're helping to bring a lot of those back and use them. So yeah, well, like should we get into the more of the plants?
I
Like
know. I have like questions about
Sure.
specific herbs too. Like,
yeah, there's so many plants.
yeah. For the logo that you created, you did that logo, right? Yourself, the art.
So I worked with a designer who I've known since middle school, actually.
Oh, cool.
It's so funny. I this is during COVID when herb stock was only digital.
Mm.
And so I was like one of the digital vendors. And this woman who lived in the area, I guess, saw me on the site and emailed me and was like, hey, I do like digital marketing. I love what you're doing. Like, I'd love to help you. And
Ooh.
she sent me like her deck or just like her portfolio.
Yeah.
And she said, "Oh, and like we can partner with my designer, Chris Santoro." And I was like, "Chris Santoro?" And I was like,
Oh,
"I
nice.
went to middle school with him, and like we just hadn't talked in forever." And then so I was just like, "Okay, yes." Like
Yeah.
but I like had been following him for years, and I was like, "Oh, all his logos are really good."
Yeah.
Um, yeah, we worked on the logo, that logo specifically for a while. And it was actually, I think, his ex-girlfriend who was also a designer, like jotted that down. And he just happened to post it to his Instagram story one day as like a process.
Cool.
But then when we met, so I was so excited for that logo. And then we met the following week, and he showed me this other one that kind of looked like a tulip. And I
Mhm.
was like, I don't like, I was like, what's the one, the skullcap one in the
Yeah.
story? Like that one's cool. And
Yeah.
so he was like, oh, okay, we can do that. And so we ended up going with that one. And yeah, that one is like inspired by the skull cap, like the lipped petal.
Cool.
Yeah.
See, yeah, I love that. And I was curious like what plant it was. I wasn't sure. But yeah, so skullcap is smoking herb clearly too. So what do you find skullcap feels like when you smoke it?
Yeah, so skullcap there is in all of the blends.
Mm.
Um, in addition to mullein and marshmallow leaf.
Mm.
But skullcap for me, like in herb school and just kind of experimenting with, what herbs really called to me, and I felt this like connection to. Skullcap was always really up there.
Hmm.
Um, it, I think like I have a tendency to just think really hard, like even when I don't want to. Like I can't let like an idea go.
Yeah.
And then as a result, like I know that like my shoulders rise and like I'll furrow my brows and I will clench my jaw.
Mm.
And it's like this idea. It's like, oh my God, like, oh, it's like right there. And like I have to figure it out. And it's like, what am I doing? I need to relax. And
Yeah.
skull cap really helps me to just like lower the shoulder and release tension. I get it like in the back of the head a lot, is because I'm like, I like kind of liken it to like my brain is just like thinking so hard that it's like being like used like a muscle, it's like
Mhm.
engaged.
Yeah.
And Skullcap just lets me like soften that and just lower and like release. And it also like that's a kind of a form of agitation,
Mm.
right?
Mm.
And this like, oh, like you just like can't stop. And
Yeah.
you're like, oh, I gotta do this, I gotta do that. Oh, it's like right on the tip of my tongue. I gotta write it down. And yeah, Skullcap just really lets me let all of that go. And it's also fantastic for agitation in like the emotional sense as
Hmm.
well as the physical, like kind of being tiffed or angry, or maybe like this coworker said something to you that got under your skin, but you can't say anything because they're like the lead on the project or whatever.
Sure.
And when I was formulating these blends, I was like, thinking about the when people are like, oh, I just like need a cigarette.
Yeah.
And it's like that, like, oh, I just like need this. It's like that's a feeling of agitation
Hmm.
and like, oh, I just need something to just like fuck this, I
Yeah.
just need to do
Take the
this.
edge off.
And I was like, okay, what if instead of them going to like nicotine, for instance, which is only really going to keep revving them up, like, what if we put some like skullcap in there that actually addresses like that kind of core symptom, if you will, that they are trying to relieve with that
Yeah.
smoke.
Totally. And it at being so like leafy and stuff, it probably burns really well too. Like
Well, so skullcap,
easy
what's
burn.
so what's interesting is if you were to smoke it on its own, it would be
Yeah.
terrible.
Because it's just so, yeah, it's kind of harsh, right?
It has no body. So
Okay.
there are herbs that smoke really well.
Yeah.
And these are going to be like your astringent herbs, like raspberry leaf or uva ursi. Astringent herbs add body to smoking blends. Rose petals is another great example.
Corn silk. Have you
And
ever done that? Have
what's that?
you ever tried corn silk?
I haven't.
It's
I've
kind of nice for
corn
like,
flowers, I have.
oh, really?
Hmm.
Cool. Okay.
Oh, I want to try that.
Corn silk, it kind of burns like tobacco because it's like longer strips. You kind of
They
chop
have
it
the
up.
fibers.
Yeah.
Does it crackle?
No,
I feel like it
not
would
not
crackle.
super crackly, but yeah,
Okay.
it burns pretty quickly too, but it makes for like a
Mm.
nice even burn.
I feel like the corn silk would also be very good at holding like stickiness. Like if you do like a honey spray.
Oh,
Um, yeah.
yeah.
Um, I forget what I was talking about
Oh,
because that's
the
I got so
astringent
intrigued by
herbs.
the
Sorry.
cornfield.
Yeah, the astringent herbs that are good for burning
Yes,
first.
yes. So, um, if you want to make your own smoking blend, you want to start with these herbs that smoke well, and that is going to be like the base of your smoking blend.
Hmm.
And I'm talking like 50% of the blend,
Hmm.
maybe even like 75%.
Hmm.
Um, but then from there, you can kind of sprinkle in these other nervines.
Hmm.
Nervines in particular are very like what you could call smoke soluble or fire soluble. Um,
Yeah.
that don't smoke well on their own,
Hmm.
but they can have this like supportive nature when they're just sprinkled in a bit when they are in a blend with these um, herbs that have a lot of body or are like very fluffy that can like hold a lot of the herbs together so that like when you roll it up or pack it in a pipe or something,
Hmm.
the herbs are kind of like evenly distributed in your smoke rather than if you think about like the typical spliff, how people will roll, they'll put like rolling tobacco, like a line of rolling tobacco and then like a line of weed.
Hmm.
Um, and then often what can happen with that is like the canoeing, where it like
Yeah.
only burns on one end.
Hmm.
So if you are ever going to smoke a spliff, just make sure you like really mix it up so that it's well
Right.
distributed.
Pro
But
tip.
yeah, so Skullcap like on its own won't be good, but in
Yeah.
a blend it's fantastic. And
Hmm.
there are a lot of other nervines as well when they're just like just a little bit sprinkled in, it really makes all the difference.
Yeah, like lavender, I think would be like just the tiniest sprinkle because it can be kind of overpowering.
Yeah, lavender is great because it's so creates this like very pillowy smoke.
Hmm.
Um, and like is essentially like an incense at the same
Hmm.
time. I
Yeah.
always think of it like you're creating these like fragrant, pillowy clouds of lavender around you. And that is just so lovely.
And in you.
Yes.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, lavender is one that sneaks up on me as like how powerful of an herb it is. Even just to smell the aroma of it, like it can just bring you down like three notches if you're in an anxious place
Absolutely.
or
And
sad,
it's
stress place.
100%. And lavender is such a common herb that like everybody knows.
Yeah,
Yeah.
true.
Um, but it really is remarkable at how powerful it
Mm,
actually can be.
yeah, totally.
And so what about like catnip? Because you mentioned that, and that's one plant that I really I like it a lot. It's just like it has such an interesting smell too. And
Yes, I love the smell. I love the shape of the leaf.
Mm, yeah.
I love the fuzziness of the leaves.
Yeah.
Um, Catnip is really great. It's especially great in a smoke because if you think about like that kind of, oh, I need a smoke, and like that feeling, like think about when you utter those words, like how tense you feel. And anxiety, anxiety is huge for smokers.
Hmm.
Um,
yeah.
and is like maybe the number one reason why people will reach for a smoke, whether it's mental or physical anxiety. Um, and with catnip is really great at like kind of subduing the anxiety that rises upward from like your abdomen up into the chest. And then from there, it can create these like short high breaths where like you're trying to breathe in but like you can't really get enough in and like the oxygen's not really going all the way down to the bottom of your lungs. And whether or not you feel mentally anxious, like that in and of itself can cause you to feel anxious because your body is being like something's wrong here and like you need to be on alert to fix it. But that's not always so easy, especially like if you work in an office or something and like you can't just go out for a walk. You're sitting at your desk and you're just like, oh, I can't. I just like, that
Yeah.
feeling.
Hmm.
Um, and Catnip is so good at just like dissolving that tension.
Hmm.
So yeah, so the skull cap is more for like the tension up here, and then that the catnip was more the tension coming up from the gut and into the chest.
Yeah, and chamomile as well.
Hmm.
I have catnip and chamomile in my sleepy blend. So catnip is like the rising tension, and chamomile is like the sinking down into the pit of your stomach tension.
Hmm.
So like by having both and kind of like addressing both concerns to bring you back to the center.
Yeah.
Hmm. That's lovely.
Do you ever work with mugwort in smoking blend?
Yes, mugwort. I've said it once, and I said say it 1,000 times. Like I can't believe how much it feels like velvet when you smoke it.
Yeah.
It's like just this. It's unbelievable to me.
Yeah.
It's so smooth, and like you smoke, and it's just like it like barely even feels like you're inhaling smoke. Like
Yeah.
when you think of smoke, you think of like hot, dry. Oh, I want to cough, but it
Hmm.
just like doesn't have that element. That's why herbs that have a lot of body are really important because if there isn't body,
Uh-huh.
it's going to feel like it just like kind of pricks you in a way, kind of in like the heat and
Hmm.
the dryness, and that is like what makes you want to cough. But
Hmm.
when there's body, it goes smooth and comes out
Yeah.
smooth.
Yeah, and so the herbs with body kind of burn more slowly too. That's part of. And
Yeah.
are there other reasons why like just because why, like why are astringent herbs why do astringent herbs have body? Do you-
Yeah, so this is something that like I'm still kind of like perplexed, like
hmm,
perplexes me.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure it has something to do with the mucous membranes.
hmm,
Last I checked, it's like because it so astringent herbs like cause like think of like a green, like a unripe banana.
mhm.
It like
Yeah.
that kind of feeling.
Uh-huh.
And if I'm being 100% honest, I can't quite remember, but it has to do something with that. I
Yeah.
believe, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it's just interesting that like those actions go together, being astringent and like constricting tissue, and
Yeah.
moisture out. Maybe, yeah, huh. Because it's kind of like the burning slowly, it's kind of like they have more moisture in a certain way.
Yeah, that and bring up the moisture. Um, it is important. So astringent herbs add body, but then also moisture adds body as
Mhm.
well.
Hmm.
Um, so take Damiana, for example.
Hmm.
Damiana isn't astringent, but when dried, it retains a lot of its oil content.
Hmm.
And so, that's why cannabis smokes so well, is because it has all these resinous trichomes in
Right.
there. And so it's that moisture is, just making it less harsh, essentially.
Mhm.
And so Damiana, because it retains a lot of that oil content, it also smokes very well.
I love Damiana in a smoke blend. It's
Hmm.
such a good one.
Yeah.
It's good. And it's like immediately mood uplifting and heart opening and just feeling, you just feel lifted in spirit from
Yes. It's so euphoric. I would say like if it's like euphoria you want or a mood boost, like if that's why you reach for a smoke is for mood, um, then Damiana is what you want.
Mm.
And while you can make it tincture or tea with it, the euphoria kind of effect will be the most pronounced when
Yeah.
smoked.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're right about that. I've definitely
Hmm.
worked with it in all the forms, and I do feel most euphoric from smoking. I never really thought about it, but you're right.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
like what you said earlier about fire soluble or smoke soluble, 'cause that's
Hmm.
not something you think about in terms of like,
Right.
a water soluble herb you make a tea out of or
Yeah.
alcohol soluble, but it really is fire is a solvent
Yeah.
that
Right.
allows the compounds to be accessed by your body. And
Mm.
I mean, like that's what we do with tobacco and cannabis all the time.
Right.
But
Yeah.
it's
I feel like for people that are um a big kind of driving force of founding Puff Herbals and kind of the decisions I make and the messaging is that I always wanted and still to this day want to bring herbalism to people that maybe otherwise wouldn't have encountered it or sought
Mhm.
it out.
Yeah.
And especially being a clinical herbalist, when I was in herb school, I would be making these different herbal preparations and giving them to my friends to try, like all these different tinctures, teas, and syrups. But I noticed when I said, "Oh, you can smoke this herb," people's ears would perk up and they'd be like, "Oh, you can smoke it." And like that would get them interested. And then they just started asking for the smoking ones I was making and then like not asking for the other things.
Mhm.
And I was like, okay, this is interesting because they're smoking these blends and they're being like, I really feel the effect. And when you smoke something, the effect is practically instantaneous
Mm.
because you inhale the smoke, it's in your lungs and it's like it's right in the bloodstream right away. And
Yeah.
then like your heart beats one time and it's in your brain.
Hmm.
And so these my friends of mine who like weren't necessarily herby or like had like an inherent interest in any of this kind of stuff were being like, wow, I really felt it because it was instant. And it was when you smoke something, also the effect can be a bit more in your face, at least in the very beginning, because it's just kind of like pow, you feel it. Rather than if you drink a tea, you kind of have to wait for it to go through your digestive system, and it's a little more, I want to say a slow burn, pardon the
Yeah.
pun. But
Yeah, it's
I,
like
as a
berries.
clinical herbalist, yeah, as a clinical herbalist, I was like, this is a really actually interesting way, for lack of a better word, to get herbs into people
Yeah.
Hmm.
and to convince them, hey, these really do affect you. And, whether or not you are maybe in tune or like aware of the effects, because they can be subtle, or like sometimes you have to work with an herb for 2 weeks
Yeah.
to
Hmm.
really be like, oh, actually, I do feel different. Um, the smoking herbs, they were like, oh, I feel it right now, and I'm
Yeah.
convinced. And then
Right.
they were like, oh, do you have something for this? And then be like, oh, actually, like this tincture would be best. And then
Hmm.
they were so much more like receptive to
Mhm.
other forms of herbal medicine.
Ooh, that's so cool. Yeah.
Yeah, that's one thing. It's kind of that I still marvel at sometimes is how people like in popular culture. It's like herbs don't work. That's just like a
Mhm.
common belief that just herbs don't work.
Right. Or they're weak drugs or something.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, when you can see that so quickly,
Hmm.
it's really amazing. And that's also brings to my mind that quote. I think it was from Daryl from Pendle. He talks about how all plants are psychoactive. Like
Yes.
it's just you
Yeah.
might not be. They're not like as psychoactive as cannabis. They're not as in your face, but they all have an effect on your mind. And on your
Mhm.
body, and your body and your mind are connected. They're
Hmm.
Yeah, that's maybe one of my most frequently asked questions. Is are will this get me high? Like I don't want anything psychoactive. And then I will kind of have to explain the difference between psychoactive and intoxicating.
mm,
Yeah.
And I think I'll kind of say like, oh, it's psychoactive in that it will help take the edge off and like lift your mood, but it's not going to be to the point where you are impaired whatsoever and like can't drive, for instance.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, and I think like, cannabis is THC is intoxicating
Hmm.
and nicotine, not intoxicating, but pretty psychoactive.
Right.
And I think like a lot of smokers or just maybe like the general public, they think of these are kind of your two options for smoking.
Mhm.
And they both kind of just like hit you over the head in their effect.
Yeah.
And I found like a lot of like my customers in like the Puff Herbals community, they will be very surprised. I had a friend of mine who founded this like big psychedelics media company, Double Blind. She was like, it's amazing how psychoactive they are.
Mm.
Um, and people would be like, yeah, they're just like, I never knew that like I could still kind of get this little boost, but have it not be in this way that like I've always assumed was like that's just like it is what it is with smoking.
Hmm.
Mm.
Yeah, that's a really clear distinction description of like those different categories of intoxication versus psychoactive. And
Yeah.
yeah, the herbs definitely have active effects on us,
Hmm.
whether in smoking or tea or tincture. And sometimes they're just a little more subtle.
Yeah.
But they herbs work. A Seven Songs quote that I remember is herbs work sometimes for some people.
Yeah.
And it's very pragmatic approach, like, but they work a lot of times.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And
And
sometimes, yeah, people are just
I
aware of it. They're maybe sometimes it's a little more subtle than.
Hmm.
yeah, and
Yeah.
that is probably why that's a big reason why Puff into the present moment as like the Pufferful's tagline is because I'm really trying to drive home this like ritual element,
Yeah.
but also like I don't want you to smoke something quick, like as fast as you can, and then kind of like go on about your day. I mean, like, sometimes that's just the reality of your day and your life. But the more that you can actually just like take a step back, focus on how the herbs are feeling in your body and like noticing, oh, maybe like this tight little like rope that you feel in your temple is like slowly softening, and just like oh, it will be affecting you. It's just a matter of like, are you going to slow down to feel the effect?
Mm.
Mm.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Yeah. And the thing with nicotine is like a lot of times because it's addictive, you just need that fix, you know? So
Right.
then it's this quick thing where you can be scrolling on your phone and smoking a cigarette, you know?
Yeah.
But when it's not when what you're smoking is not addictive, it's like a ritual that you're doing consciously.
Hmm.
It's a lot more
Yeah. And
beneficial.
right. And I think like the conventional modern cigarette that like everyone knows is actually a very recent kind of
Mhm.
invention in the world,
Yeah.
and especially with like they'll put in additives to make the nicotine hit your bloodstream faster, or they'll put in additives to make the paper burn
Yeah.
less quickly.
Hmm.
Um, and there's like all these things, like of course you can get organic tobacco and organic cigarettes, but it's kind of that delivery system that was specifically designed to get you addicted
Yeah.
and to get you to smoke often throughout the day. A pack of cigarettes is 20. Like that's a lot, and after what, 4 or 5 days, they'll start going stale.
Mm.
Unless you put them in a plastic bag or a jar or something, but most people don't. And so there's this kind of like the way it's packaged is for repeat purchase
Yeah.
and, you know, addiction essentially.
Yeah, and there's a whole multi-million dollar marketing industry
Mhm.
behind it as well of getting
Yeah.
into their minds, not just even like the addictive
Hmm.
physical traits, but the mental addiction too of like perceiving it to be like cool. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Which, like, if I'm being 100% honest, I do think there is a cool element to it.
Hmm.
But it's like maybe it's cool because like you're chilling down by the lake with your friend and like
Yeah.
tasting it and like you're actually talking about not the weather for
Yeah.
once or complaining about your job. Like maybe
Yeah.
you're actually talking about like how are you? You
Right.
know?
Hmm.
Um,
Dropping in.
yeah, exactly. And I think like, I've kind of my product has taken many forms throughout the years and it like in the beginning I like really was adamant that I didn't want to call them cigarettes, even if it
Mhm.
was herbal cigarettes. I'd call them
Yeah.
herbal smokes. But
Nice.
then, after kind of seeing how people responded, it
Hmm.
was like, okay, the fact that there are other herbs in here that aren't tobacco or cannabis is already an educational hurdle for a lot of people.
Yeah.
So it's like the less I can do, like the more I can do to make it 100% obvious what it is,
Yeah.
then that's just reducing barriers for people.
Yeah,
And then it's
totally.
like, okay, this is familiar. There's a filter. I know what to do.
Yeah.
And then from there, it's like, oh, this is what's in here. Like this smells different,
Hmm.
and then that will kind of like pique their curiosity. And then that is kind of the opportunity for me as like the clinical herbalist, to then it's like, oh, okay, if you want to learn more, here's all this information on the website. You can follow us on Instagram for like little rituals here and there. But yeah, I think having this clinical herbalism background, it's like, how can you meet the client or the customer where they are
Yeah.
and get them to actually get the herbs in them.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So speaking of your website, and Instagram, what are your Instagram handles and website so listeners can go check it out right now?
Yeah. Website is puffherbals.com and the Instagram is puff.herbals.
Sweet.
Cool.
Awesome. Yeah, everyone just take a moment and go follow Puff Herbals right now on Instagram. I had one other question before we wrap up, and it's about herbs that you found maybe aren't the best for smoking. Is there a certain genre of herbs that you definitely would not recommend smoking, or something that you tried that you thought would be really good, and then you're like, oh, this doesn't work?
I would say I'm seeing more and more, especially in like the nootropic kind of like what's the word? Psychonaut community
Yeah, uh-huh.
is like smoking dried Amanita muscaria.
Uh-huh.
Um, which, if I'm being honest, I haven't tried it. I would try it,
Yeah.
but I think with any mushroom, I've seen some products out there from companies that are a little sketchy looking, um, having mushrooms in their smoke, and it's just like you have to be very careful with that because like if there's spores in there,
Uh-huh.
like I don't know, you don't want to be inhaling spores into your
Yeah.
lungs. Cinnamon is another one,
Oh, yeah.
which is such a shame because
I
it's
know.
delicious. Yeah. But it like the the powderiness, like the little bits just get so fine
Mm.
that when you inhale it, it will like do damage, like more
Oh,
damage.
sure.
And I mean, obviously smoking anything isn't good for you.
Yeah.
Um, but to like if you're gonna do it anyway,
Yeah.
I would say cinnamon is one to be avoided.
Good
Um,
point.
Cinnamon, however, is fantastic. If you just like put a cinnamon stick in your water bottle throughout the day,
Mm-hmm.
it's like cool, it's moistening. It's
Mm.
warming as well, and it's just like for smokers, anything you can do to like offset the hot and dry nature. So like get moisture in there, get like marshmallow root infusion, cold overnight infusion is fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
Cinnamon while warming, the moisture is really good.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and then I've seen some people again in like the psychedelic community talking about smoking kanna. And again, I haven't tried that. Um, but like kind of like the traditional way of working with kanna is to chew it. And I think just like there's some traditions that shouldn't really be like altered in this way too, because that is one where it's like, oh, it gets you high.
Mm.
And, I'm all for getting high sometimes.
Yeah.
But like that is one like that wouldn't be my go-to for Kana, I would say.
Yeah, if you're in a culture that has developed a relationship with a particular psychoactive herb over, hundreds or thousands of years, they probably found the ideal way to interact with that herb.
Yes. Yeah.
You know,
Hmm.
maybe like Salvia divinorum, you don't need to like extract by 60.
Yeah, or like you don't need to be
Yeah,
maybe like even microdosing that like
Mhm.
yeah,
every day, you know?
Yeah.
yeah. So the moistening, cooling and moistening, very is that why you add marshmallow to the?
Yeah, marshmallow and mullein are in all blends. You know, mullein, like everyone talks about mullein as being, you know, I even say like it should be in everything you smoke.
Mm,
Um, but it doesn't have great body to it.
mm,
So a lot of
Such
people
a
will,
floofer.
sorry.
It's such a floofer.
It is a floofer. So it's good at it. You want it in there because
Hmm.
it's good at like getting everything stuck together and fluffy. But I've had a number of people reach out and say, "Oh, I read your blog post on mullein and I tried smoking it and it was terrible. Like, what gives?" And it's like, well, did you only smoke mullein on its own?
Yeah.
Because it has no body and
Yeah.
it's just gonna make you cough instantly and it's gonna feel harsh. But
Mhm.
if you put it in to a blend, it really smooths it out. Same with marshmallow leaf as well. I really like the two in a blend for that, um, adding the body, a bit of a moistening element, the cooling nature as well.
Yeah.
Anything you can do to bring energetically smoke back toward like kind of the center of like your graph of like your energetic graph of like hot, dry, cool, moist, like
Yeah.
back toward the center is going to be good. But mullein and marshmallow leaf, they don't really have like much of a flavor in the
Hmm.
smoke.
Hmm.
And so they are really good to add, like say if you are a tobacco smoker or a cannabis smoker, you can add it in and it's not like you're gonna be like, oh, this tastes like grass or like some weird herb. Like you probably won't even taste it, but you will feel the difference in the smoke.
Hmm. Yeah.
mm.
Cool.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, this has been a really great conversation. It's so interesting to talk about herbs in use in this way, you know, like
Hmm.
interacting with herbs via the solvent of fire, you know,
Mm.
and that is a traditional way that they've been worked with for at forever.
Yeah, yeah,
Hmm.
So, and I think part of it is that like smoking, I mean, smoking isn't necessarily good for your lungs, you know. But also
yeah,
in our culture, smoking has become something that is very negative. You know, like people die from lung cancer all the time. Um,
yeah.
so there's definitely a bad there's a
There's a stigma
Stigma.
for sure.
stigma,
Thank you.
yeah.
That's the word.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. And I think like what's interesting is, being a business owner and kind of joining these kind of founder communities, and listening to like different podcasts about founder stories. I hear so many about like alcohol brands and alcohol founders. And kind of as a modern society, like everyone knows drinking isn't good for you, and everyone
yeah.
knows drinking too much isn't good for you. Like it's literally poison that you're
Yeah.
drinking. But
Hmm.
we all are like, oh, like one or two is fine. People will bring their kids to breweries on weekends.
For sure.
And like they like that craft brewery element is like they feel comfortable bringing their children there. Obviously, the children aren't drinking, but like it's like a community builder and
Yeah.
we can like accept that you just like have common sense when it comes to this particular type of poison. And while like I wouldn't say you can just like smoke all day every day and as long as it's herbs it's fine because it's not, but like if you are going to smoke,
Hmm.
I know you're going to do it anyway. And even if it's like, oh, this can help you smoke less. It's like, no, if you enjoy smoking and if like you are hanging out with a couple friends and like this is what you do, if this is like a catalyst for your community gatherings, like, is it really that bad if like you smoke a couple times a week?
Yeah.
Like, I don't think so. Like, as long as you are just being holistic in your hedonism, like
Mhm.
then I don't really see the problem.
Yeah, I think that's a
Yeah.
good approach. Yeah.
So, we so I saw about you. We heard about your website and your handle. So you also have some events coming up.
Yeah, what's new with you?
Yeah, what's going on
Yes.
in your
So
life?
I will be teaching holistic hedonism, herbs and rituals for mindful indulgence at Herbstock in Somerville, Mass. First weekend of June, and also vending as puff herbals in the marketplace. And then in mid-August, I'll be at the Good Medicine Confluence
Cool.
Nice.
in
Yeah.
New Mexico. That's the plant healer event.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Teaching both herbal smoking blends and holistic hedonism there as well.
Cool.
And then in early September, I'll be at the Great Lakes Herb Fair in Michigan,
Oh, cool. I want to go to that this
teaching
year.
herbal smoking blends and maybe vending. I'm waiting to hear back, but I
Okay.
will be there.
Awesome.
Yeah, those are three great events.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm so excited. I haven't been to the Great Lakes Herb Fair or the Good Medicine Confluence yet. It'll be my first time, so I'm very excited.
Awesome.
Yeah. I want to go to the Great Lakes Herb Fair this year. I've just heard so many good things about it, and Olatakumbu Abasi is going to be speaking, who we've interviewed before, and is from he used to live in Pittsburgh, where Isaac
Mm.
lived, and I'm like, they live far away now, so I'm excited to
Yeah, the
see
class
that
list
they're here.
looks amazing this
Yeah,
year.
it does. It looks
Yeah.
really good.
Mhm.
Very inspiring event. But yeah, thanks for being a part of our podcast and for taking the time today. And um, I encourage all of our listeners to go to those events if they're in that area to see you and to follow you on Instagram and go to your site and order some herbal smokes.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me.
Yeah,
Of course. Yeah.
absolutely.
Cheers.
Cheers.